Alright, hello everybody and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle, and I wanted to try something a little bit different with this episode. I'm trying out some new things you might see on the channel coming up shortly. Trying to revamp a little bit, trying to discover what I enjoy doing on the channel and what I want to put out. And so I thought I'd experiment with just doing a bit of an off-the-cuff rant style video, just about a topic that's been on my mind lately, that I've been wanting to talk about, that I've been thinking deeply. And based on a lot of the comments I've been getting and about the response to certain recent albums that have been coming out, this is something that's near and dear to me and that I think would be worth putting out in a video just to give my pure, unfiltered thoughts about, so don't take any offense. This is just my personal opinions. I'll preface it with that. And it's just me coming to terms with how I feel about stuff, because I have a lot of anxiety, as many of you know if you've been watching my videos. And so I'm constantly thinking through things in my brain. It's like an overactive thing that's going on that I never stop thinking, never stop trying to work out my feelings on things and why am I annoyed by this? Why am I feeling bad about this thing? Trying to come to terms with myself and who I am and what I think about stuff compared to what other people are thinking, and why am I thinking about it so much differently than other people seem to be. So what sparked this basically is the Steph Wilson album that came out, the Harmony Codex. I was really excited about the album. I'm a huge Steph Wilson fan, and I knew Steph Wilson himself was excited about the album. He was promoting it a lot, doing these shows basically where he'd go into a dark room with an audience and they just listen to the album in this pure Dolby Atmos mix, and it would be very immersive. The room would just be dark and just focused on the music. He's called it cinema for the ears. And so I know he spent a lot of time and effort. He was proud of this record, and I don't know all the thoughts and feelings of Steph Wilson and all that, but this is just my impression of him as an artist and someone I've followed for many years, that he put a lot of heart and effort and felt that there was a lot of artistic integrity to his work here with the Harmony Codex. So I was a little bit discouraged when it came out, and I heard some dissenting voices, some opinions that, he's just somewhat of a sellout, or he's not a great artist. He maybe had a flash in the pan with, Raven That Refused to Sing and Hand Cannot Erase, but he's really lost the plot, and, maybe those were just lucky albums for him and he really just has no talent. And, just really bizarre rants that people have had about Steph Wilson, how he's overrated, too hyped up, not as good as people think he is, and his new album just doesn't have any artistic integrity, and is just him delving deeper into this road that's more pop-centric and, not to what people wanted from him. And I was just very sad because I listened to it with open ears and an open mind. I really enjoyed it, and I thought it really connected super well with me and showcased a lot of artistic integrity in my mind, that he was going in a lot of different directions. He was bringing together a lot of different styles and sounds and doing it in such a fascinating fashion. I was just really blown away with it, and just all of these cool, intricate sound design type things. And I think there's great songwriting underneath it too. There's just some great moments, and it brings together so many different elements from his catalog. He does some jazz stylings, he does some prog stuff, he brings in some of the more poppier Beatles-esque type work, especially with the second track, What Life Brings. There's just so many elements, and sure, there's a little bit of that electronic type stuff and poppier stuff that he was experimenting with on the Future Bites, which I know a lot of people didn't care for, but I just found it to be a great blend of music and just showed a new side to him and showcased such artistic beauty that I was blown away with it. And it's somewhat discouraging sometimes to be really excited about something and wanting to talk about it, and immediately people feel like they have to jump on it and just put it down and say, oh, well, because everyone's so hyped and high on this release, I'm going to tear it apart because that's the cool thing to do, And so it just made me think about how I just like to like things. I just enjoy liking stuff, and I don't like the hatred that things can get online, And I know sometimes it's a bit of the very vocal minority making this seem like it's the big opinion, when most people are probably liking it and enjoying it like I am. So it's probably just those few voices just sticking out a little bit too much. But it still is a bit discouraging to come out with a video review that you're excited for, and a couple of the comments come in and it's people just complaining and saying this is just like a pile of garbage, and who would like this kind of music, and he's totally sold out and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like it's such a shame that people are so close-minded sometimes and just don't embrace change and new things that artists are trying to do, and just try to rain on the parade of those who are enjoying and liking things. I hate when people just try to rally against something and try to prove that it's bad and try to like tear it apart. And this isn't any fandom. This isn't any place that I come across. I feel this way about the Star Wars sequels, which I actually really enjoy, especially Force Awakens and Last Jedi. Not to get too nerdy and weird and off on a tangent, but I really liked those movies, but I felt like it became such a pressure to like, these are bad Star Wars movies. They're not as good as the original trilogy. Everyone must think this way. And it was just so discouraging as someone who was a fan of it. Like, why can't people just let people be fans of things and like them? Why is that so hard? Why do people feel like they have to tear things down and tear it apart? And it somewhat builds into this consensus opinion where if you're an outlier, you just feel very isolated and alone. Felt that way with the Game of Thrones finale or the Lost finale, to bring it into television world. I'm a big fan of a lot of movies and television and of course with music on this channel. And there's just certain things that come out that people just all decide as a group for whatever reason they're not going to like it. And there's more of a positive angle to the Harmony Codex. I think there's more people that like it and at least at a baseline appreciate it for what it is. But I definitely felt that way more with the Future Bites, which just totally seemed like a big whiff for most of the prog community, for the music community that I follow at least. And I actually really liked the Future Bites. I thought it was great. It's not my favorite Stephen Wilson album, I'll admit. I prefer the sounds of The Raven and Hand Cannot Erase, but I thought there was some interesting things on there, some great sound design, some great little hidden gems, some great songwriting. 12 Things I Forgot is one of my favorite Stephen Wilson songs. I just hated how people just immediately dismissed it. Oh, this is his pop record. This is him selling out. This is him embracing everything we hate about music. Give it a chance. Let him be him and be artistic. And what's the funny thing is people talk about it's his pop sellout record, but there's no pop on the radio today that sounds like that. It's not like something that's just full-blown pop music that you'd hear on the radio. Not that there's anything wrong with that either, but there's a lot more creative things going on and little proggy flourishes that would never make it into the mainstream, really. And so it just was mind-boggling that people just outright dismissed it. Oh, this is a terrible album, and we've all decided this as the prog community, that we're all not going to like this. And it's discouraging to someone who's an outlier saying, hey, but I like it out over here. So, and on the flip side of the coin, which I was starting to realize as I was reading more of the comments about the Harmony Codex and talking more with people who don't really care for it, I need to realize that it's also okay for people to not like things, right? Everything that comes out doesn't have to be massively praised, and, it's okay to have criticisms and to have reservations about things. I don't want people just blindly following and loving things either, but I just wish there was a bit more respect about it. And because to me, there's two different ways that it comes across. The way that I don't like that it comes across is this more objective, this is trash, this is crap music, this is just has no value in it, it's just artistically stale, it's terrible music. I don't like that approach because it's dismissing everyone else who finds artistic value and who does love the material, and it's saying, your tastes are bad. Well, that's not totally fair. The approach that I like better, that I think is fair, is to say it's just not to my taste. This album doesn't line up with the type of music I tend to enjoy. I'm not a fan of the electronica style drums. I don't really like the pop influences. I much more prefer Stephen Wilson's earlier material because it spoke more to me and to my taste in music. And so I'm going to pass on this one. It's just not for me. That's respectable. I understand that, and I totally appreciate that as a comment. But sometimes people just speak it like it's this objective truth, like this is objectively a terrible thing, where that's not fair because there's people who love it and adore it. And I'd like to think that I have some integrity when I talk about music, and I have a measure of good taste. I hope people who watch this channel would agree with that I have fairly good taste in music. So by dismissing the Harmony Codex as just total trash, it sort of tarnishes my reputation and my ability to discern good taste in music, since I love it so much. Does that mean there's something wrong with me and my tastes? And it leads to one last point, because I've probably been talking too long, but I find it fascinating. I was talking a little bit in my YouTube group, our chat group, about this, that I think there's two different approaches that people tend to have when it comes to the artist that they follow and really love. See, for me, when I fall in love with an artist and really fall for their music and I'm really excited about them, I become somewhat of a loyalist of them. I'm a huge Neil Morse fan, as has been well documented on my channel. And so in my eyes, he can really do no wrong. I've fallen in love with him, and I trust him as an artist to follow his artistic vision, whatever he sees fit to do. And that's all I really want, is for Neil Morse to do what he feels passionate about and to put out the music that means the most to him. And to me, that showcases his artistic integrity, that he's able to put out the music that means the most to him. He doesn't get taken in by fan opinion and do something just to make people happy or whatnot. And to me, that's what the best artists do, is they follow their muse. They do what feels the best to them. And so I'm just willing to follow that path. And sometimes they'll put out albums that I don't prefer, but I would never, say that's an objectively terrible record. It's just they went in a direction that just wasn't quite for me, and I'll hit them on the next album. You know what I mean? But I'd never tear it apart as like, okay, they really made a misstep here. They made a terrible album. This is not a good album. I would never say that, because I would just recognize that it's not an album for me. Neil Morse came out with Jesus Christ the Exorcist, which wasn't an album for me. I didn't connect with it, but I don't think it's an objectively terrible album. I think it has merit, because Neil Morse as an artist has artistic merit in my eyes. I feel the same way about Steph Wilson. I'm willing to follow him with the Future Bites and now with the Harmony Codex, even though it's not the traditional prog that I usually go for. But I think some other people have a little bit of an opposite approach. I have the more loyalist approach, where I'm a fan and I stick with them through thick and thin. Some people, I think, when they really fall in love with someone, they have a little bit even more intense scrutiny about what they're doing. Like, oh, we really loved these classic albums from this artist, so now they're judging everything off of this metric of like, we know this artist is capable of creating this masterpiece, this really incredible album. So when an album doesn't measure up to what we consider their masterpiece, they give it a little bit more criticism. Like, hey, we know Steph Wilson's capable of Hand Cannot Erase and Raven That Refused to Sing. So if this doesn't stack up to those masterpieces, it's like, well, we know he can do better. We know he can, create a masterpiece because he's done it. And so people, I think, scrutinize some of his future works based upon that metric. I think that's why oftentimes these albums that are a little bit, away from what they typically do get a bit more criticism from fans, because they came to love the artist based on a specific album or part of their career, and that's what they judge the artist by, is like everything is based upon the metric of, is it like this album? Is it as good as this album that I love and that I consider a masterpiece from this artist? But I think that's a little bit of an unfair thing, at least, and once again, it comes down to personal preference and taste and how you experience things. But for me, I feel like that's a little bit of an unfair judgment, because I want the artist to explore the territory that's most meaningful for them. I'd never want to stifle Steph Wilson's creativity to want to explore these like more 80s electronica style sounds that he wants to. Maybe it'll create something new and exciting and different. I don't want the Hand Cannot Erase Part 2 or the Raven Part 2. He's been there, done that, and I'm glad to have it. And so I'm just excited for the journey, where some people really scrutinize each individual album based upon the previous works and like, does this stack up? Does this measure up to his best stuff? No, it doesn't. So that therefore it must be crap. It must just not be of worth. And I think that creates a little bit of a toxic environment sometimes when people take it too far and treat it like it's an objective fact that this album is not nearly as good as this album from before. But for some other people, it might be. Maybe this new direction that Stephen Wilson's going in is a better direction for their musical taste and makes them feel better about the music. So I guess it all boils down to treating music as objective, when for me music is mostly subjective, where it comes down to the listener, their personal preference and taste. And I think people get it wrong sometimes when they treat things so objectively. And granted, it's probably me being sensitive and treating opinions as facts. When people state things online, I should just automatically assume that it begins with, in my opinion, and then people saying what they want to say, but sometimes the way people frame things and say things are so definitive and so like, this is just objectively trash and we hate this, that it just feels like an attack and it just feels so negative. And I, as you know, on this channel, like to celebrate music. I like to celebrate artists and get excited for what they're coming up with and follow them on their journeys. And that's really what I do. That's what I love. That's my hobby. I, more than anything, more than finding cool albums, more than finding good songs to listen to and music to accompany my life, I'm trying to find and fall in love with bands and artists that mean something to me, where I can follow them as a fan and get excited for their future projects. That's what I love the most in the music world. And so I get a little bit defensive when one of my favorite artists gets attacked even slightly. And so I wanted to rant a little bit about it and explain a little bit why. And I'm going to try to be a bit more calm about it and let people have their opinions and not insert my own opinions and try to change people's minds. That's not my place. It's perfectly fine for me to like something, and consequently, it's perfectly fine for you to not like that same thing. It's just my own taste versus your own taste, and no one's right or wrong. It's just right or wrong for you and what's right or wrong for me. And I'm just trying to find people who share a similar mindset and who like similar music to me. Not every recommendation I give is going to be a perfect recommendation. Sometimes it will be something you don't care for and you'll just move on and move to the next thing. But that's what music is. I come across tons of music I just don't care for, and I just move on from it. I don't spend a lot of time with it. I'm just like, well, this isn't really to my taste. I'd rather move and spend the time I do have for music on things I really love and enjoy. So that's my particular preference. So that's what I have to say today. A little bit rambly, but hopefully some of my points got across and you were entertained by some of my thoughts about this kind of thing. So let me know if you like this style video, if this was interesting to you, if you'd like me to do more of this kind of thing in the future, and give your thoughts in the comments. Maybe you don't agree with what I'm saying, or you approach things in a totally different way that I didn't discuss here. So be fascinated to hear about it. So thank you guys for joining me, and as always, stay civil in the comments. Be kind. These are just my opinions and thoughts, nothing definitive, and I'm not meaning to attack anyone and anyone's taste. So I think everyone's musical tastes are valid. No matter what you fall in love with, it's valid for you. So thank you guys so much, and just keep enjoying the music, everybody. Bye!